Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off because today I'm going to be reviewing and paging through Jackals, The Fall of the Children of Bronze from Osprey Games. Is this campaign perfect for fans of Sword and Sandals role-playing, or will game masters fall to their knees in despair if they pick up this book? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, today I'm going to be reviewing Jackals, The Fall of the Children of Bronze in just a moment. But before I do want to once again thank everybody out there for all the kind thoughts and prayers they've sent my way regarding the recent triple bypass surgery that I had. It's been almost 6 weeks since the surgery. I am about to start my cardiovascular rehab in a couple of days. And the doctors all say that I am well ahead of the curve. So once again, thank you so much for those kind thoughts and prayers. They really, really do mean a lot. So today I am going to be reviewing Jackals, The Fall of the Children of Bronze from Osprey Games. This campaign is written by John Matthew DeFoggy with art provided by Guilherme Ducos, Veronica Fedorova, John McCambridge, and Randy Musso. The 240-page hardcover is available from Osprey Games for $35. You can grab the PDF over at DriveThruRPG for $24.50. So let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got The Fall of the Children of Bronze. So before we dive in, I do want to point out that the fine folks over at Osprey Games were kind enough to provide me with this adventure campaign for review, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share my thoughts about this book with you. These days, it is very important that you know that. All right, let's take a look at the back. The Fall of the Children of Bronze is a grand campaign for Jackals and includes 14 adventures spanning 9 years. Players will explore the ancient myths and legends of the War Road, from the bustling streets of Amina, Naoni to the north, and Centum in the south, to abandoned temples in the wastes and caverns deep within the earth. They will encounter beings and powers from the past, ancient but far from dormant, and come face to face with the hidden hand that would see the law of men torn down and chaos brought to the Zaharets. So as you can see, this is an epic campaign for Jackals. And I've already reviewed Jackals and really liked it. I think it is perfect for those out there who are fans of Sword and Sandals kind of role-playing games. There are a lot of interesting aspects to the game world that I think is very cool. One being that the player characters are kind of mercenaries. They are heroic, but they're not necessarily liked by everyone because, in essence, wherever these jackals go, trouble follows. Or whenever they show up, there's always trouble. So this is as I mentioned, an epic campaign. It does span 9 years. And each year, we're either going to have 1 or 2 adventures. Earlier on, we have 2 adventures per year, and they are broken down into 3 acts. So I do want to point out that I'm going to try to keep this pretty spoiler-free. But you will see some things in here that are probably going to spoil some of the adventures. So if you are a player out there and hoping that your game master, or in this case, your lore master, is going to run The Fall of the Children of Bronze, then by all means, I recommend checking out one of the other 1,000+ videos on the channel. See you later. All right, so if it's just the lore masters and I, let's dive on in. So we've got a breakdown of how each year is presented, which I found very interesting. I thought was very cool and very helpful to the lore master. Will point out this is not presented as a Wizards of the Coast Dungeons and Dragons adventure. This is not a Pathfinder 2nd edition adventure path. It is not, everything is spelled out. It is not a ton of like hand holding. You're going to find there's not a ton of read alouds or anything like that with these adventures as well. So these adventures are kind of presented a little kind of old school, or we'll have some bullet points. We have everything laid out fairly intuitively. So using this at the game table should be very, very easy. There shouldn't be any problems whatsoever with this at all. But I do have some issues with this book, and I will talk about that as we go through the review. So each year is going to provide us with adventures. So we're going to get an introduction of what's going on in this year and the theme of what's going on. So as an example, this first year, the year of fallen seeds, is the theme is kind of deep within the earth, is kind of the theme of that year. So we're going to get some important events that are going on, because what's happening here is, and this is kind of a spoiler, but the grand scale of this campaign is essentially the fall of one city-state to be replaced with the rise of another city-state. And the Jackals take part in this. They're not necessarily the movers and shakers, but they do play an important role in what's going on. Something else that I should point out that is kind of interesting as far as Jackals is the player characters, their main goal is to retire in comfort and wealth. So essentially, each of the adventures is going to have a bit of detail about, well, what happens for a jackal retiring? What are some of the things that they could look forward to? So one aspect of this campaign is that every player character that starts this campaign is not going to go through the end. Now, that does not necessarily mean that this is a meat grinder by any stretch of the imagination, because it's not. But one of the aspects of Jackals is the player characters are looking to retire. That's what they want to be able to do. All right, so jumping on through, as you can see, we have the 3 different acts. So we have the first act, second act, and the third act. So here we've got a little bit of a cavern delve, I guess we'll say. But as you can see, we've got these bullet points for the lore master. So some of the important aspects of for an example here, this is an NPC, and what kind of information can they provide to the player characters? Well, here we've got the bullet points. So one thing about these adventures is that they really don't all tie together. Earlier adventures in the campaign, you're essentially kind of just you're just planting seeds. You're foreshadowing what's going to be happening later on in the campaign. It's really like the last 4 adventures that do tie more together as a campaign. But one of the aspects of these earlier adventures too is to kind of create relationships and to work for patrons and to have some sort of possibly a loyalty to a particular city state. So just kind of zipping on through. The adventures are a nice mix. We've got a little bit of kind of dungeon delving, and then we've got some urban adventuring also. But as you can see here, the artwork is kind of sparse throughout this. But once again, once we have each of the years, we have some artwork. Pretty nice artwork throughout, but I mean, that is a given with Osprey Games, really. So kind of give you an idea here. We do have some new creatures that are introduced. We have some new monsters that are introduced. There is also an interesting quandary that the player characters will be faced with late in the campaign that I find pretty interesting as well. Something else to keep in mind, each one of these adventures does not necessarily happen to have a happy ending. Sometimes it might seem that the player characters have vanquished their opponent or have put things to rest, and that's not necessarily the case. That there can be some fallout from what's happened. So you'll find some of the later adventures in the later years will build on something that happened previously. Like I said, some of the earlier adventures are more kind of foreshadowing, kind of laying the path out of what's going to go on. So the later adventures, which really kind of are tied together, the kind of interesting aspect with those is that they're going to be more free form than the earlier adventures. And the reasoning behind that is that you've been playing these adventures for a while. So you'll have pretty much knocked off 9, 10 adventures. So each lore masters group is going to have approached all these things a bit differently. Everybody's not going to have the same results from or same conclusions to each of the adventures. So that's why they're a little more open-ended, a little more sandboxy, but still laid out very nicely. I mean, there is a specific thing going on in each of the adventures. So here we get into year 6. This is where we see the change. So we no longer have 2 adventures per year, and this is where we kind of kick off the climax of the campaign. So the artwork is very well done, and this is more of an urban adventure here. And I always like it's not necessarily 3D, but it's kind of, I don't necessarily want to say geometric. I like this kind of dungeon layout, especially in games that are more theater of the mind, where you're not sitting there going like, okay, well, I'm going to use my minis, and this is 10 feet for each square and things like that. So I definitely like that. We've started to see more and more of that with role-playing games, and I find that very cool. I find it very interesting. To me personally, I think it just is more inspiring to the game master than just the standard old, like blue ink, overhead graph paper sorts of maps. All right, so here we're going to get towards the conclusion, the price of victory. This is the adventure that I'm talking about, where the players have a real decision to make, and the kind of adventurers, the sort of characters that they are, can really be impacted by what they decide. So I like this adventure quite a bit. So as I mentioned, what the main gist of this tale is the fall of one city-state to be replaced by another city-state. So essentially the fall of one empire, the fall of the Children of Bronze, to be replaced by another empire. And I find that very, very interesting because, of course, that's what happened throughout history. So this is kind of like a Mesopotamia, Sumerian, ancient Egypt sort of setting. One aspect of this as well is that the people of the Zaharets had until recently been enslaved by these monstrous overseers who have been overthrown, but they're still kind of on the fringe. They're on the periphery of the of civilization. All right, so we get a couple of new patrons. that the Jackals can work for, that they can establish relationships with. Then we get a glossary of NPCs, and we do have quite a few NPCs throughout the adventure. And that is it. So that is Jackals, The Fall of the Children of Bronze. So let's swing on over to the other camera because I will provide some final thoughts and a review score. So once again, really excited to see Osprey Games branching out and bringing supplemental material to one of the role-playing games. This is the first time I've seen it, and I am very excited for it. If you follow Osprey Games and, you know, maybe you're a fan of Frostgrave or Oathmark, you know, with the miniatures games, they do a lot of follow-up. Not so much with the role-playing games as of yet. So very excited to see this book. It is a smaller size hardcover. This is kind of like the A5. This is kind of digest size. It'll be nice and convenient at the game table for your lore masters out there as well. I like the overall theme of this campaign. I find it very interesting, and I find it very cool that it's, even though this is a fantasy setting, that is kind of a historical thing where we would see the downfall of one civilization to be quickly replaced by another. So I think that's very cool also. The adventures have a nice kind of variation between them. It's not all the same kind of stuff. We get a little bit of dungeon delving. We get a lot of urban adventure. We've got loads of NPCs for the characters to work with and interact with. So very, very interesting. Now, I have some issues. They're not huge, but I do have some issues. For one, I honestly think that this is a campaign that you need to be an experienced game master to get the most out of. And the reason behind that is, like I said earlier in the review, there's not a bunch of hand-holding. Sure, there's some game master advice, lore master advice, but it's not like you'll find in other more famous role-playing games. So there is a lot for the lore master to unpack in each of the adventures. I personally think that this needs to be fleshed out a lot more, with a lot more adventures taking place over those 9 years. To me, it's just going to feel kind of odd, where early on it's going to be like, oh, so we've got this northern adventure, we have this southern adventure next year, moving along. So I think it needs to be fleshed out a little bit. There is loads in this book, though, so I could see, especially depending on how often you get together to play, I could see this campaign going on for quite some time. Obviously, I don't think it's as, intense or as extensive as, say, Mask of Nay or Lothotep, but this is a nice, epic campaign. Also, gotta say, the PDF is outrageously priced. Now, this is something that we see with Osprey, and I think it mainly comes from Osprey Publishing having so many historical books and books that a lot of miniatures painters will pick up because of the color uniform plates and things like that. I don't think Osprey Games is used to the whole concept of role-playing game PDFs should be about 50% of the MSRP of the physical book. I mean, if it's a toss-up between paying $35 for the physical book or $24.50 for a PDF, it's a no-brainer. Pick up the physical book. So I would have liked to have seen the PDF to be about maybe $16.99, $17.99, something like that. I think that would be a much more fair price. Once again, I like what's in this book. I do think you have to be a pretty experienced game master to get the most out of it. And you're really going to need to create some adventures to flesh out this campaign as well. But I certainly can recommend Jackals, The Fall of the Children of Bronze. And on a scale of 0 to 10, I give this campaign a 7.5 out of 10. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, ding that bell. It'll not only let you know when I upload videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs right here on YouTube as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news and first looks at tabletop games. Once again, of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for even more gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot else. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you so much for watching. And until I see you next time, here's hoping each and every one of you have an opportunity to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your own gang. Oh, you're still here. Well, while you're kicking it, how about subscribing to the Gaming Gang channel? Or seeing the latest episode of the Gaming Gang Dispatch, or finding out what YouTube recommends you check out here at my channel. And of course, don't forget, get your geek on at thegaminggang.com.